Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the Committee Reads. I am your host, KWCs, and with me today I have Alex, Nagoda, and Joe. And today we will be taking a look at Obsidius versus Krystalak versus Bagan by Christian Salabert. Screams rang out as Krystalak pulled himself up from the watery depths and stepped foot upon Honolulu's sandy shores. The Crystallian demon sensed something on the island, something familiar. Whatever it was, it had to be eradicated. Nearing two tall buildings by the beach, he placed his clawed hands on them, pushing through them and reducing them to rubble as he marched past them. His ears having been assaulted long enough by the cries of the people fleeing beneath him, Krystalak pointing his head downward and let out an annoyed growl. Opening his maw, the crystal mutant incinerated the crowds with a blast of his prism beam. Further and further, the creature marched, trampling structure and human alike underfoot. Soon, his destination became clear. Puena? Otherwise known as the Punch Bowl Crater, which I will be calling it from now on. A massive volcanic mark on the Earth's surface. Just as Krystalak approached the rim of the crater, the ground began to shake. Krystalak held his footing and watched as the Earth's crust began to buckle. It was obvious that something was starting to push itself out from underneath. Krystalak's eyes narrowed as the soil exploded and a hulking form pulled itself out of the crater. Rearing his head back, Obsidius bellowed into the sky. It was Obsidius that Krystalak had come to destroy. Flexing his crystal claws, the spiked beast got ready to attack and slay his brother. But Obsidius had other plans. Curling himself up into a large stone ball, the molten monster rolled forward, slamming into Krystalak's chest and hurtling him through the air, crashing back into the city. As Krystalak shook his head, regaining his wits, Obsidius rolled down the side of the hill of sacrifice, rapidly approaching the crystal beast. If Krystalak wanted to fight, then he'd get one. Just as Obsidius was about to slam into him again, Krystalak suddenly leapt into the air, letting the rocky creature pass him harmlessly underneath him. As Krystalak landed back on his feet, Obsidius unfurled himself and turned to face the crystal beast. Letting out a roar of defiance, Obsidius was cut off as Krystalak nailed him square in the chest with his prism beam, sending the golem crashing into the sea. An immense cloud of steam burst from the waves as the cool waters came into contact with Obsidius' scalding hot body. Before Obsidius could pull himself up off his back, Krystalak leapt onto his chest and began slashing away with his razor-sharp claws, drawing sparks with each blow against Obsidius' rocky hide. As his foe raised his hand to land another fierce slash, Obsidius belched forth a torrent of molten lava, covering Krystalak's face in it. With the creature distracted, clutching his scalded face, Obsidius swiped at him with his powerful arm, knocking the white and purple beast into the waves. As Krystalak crashed into the water, Obsidius stood and left the water, marching back onto dry land. The water wasn't lethal to him, but he didn't need it dampening his molten powers. Scraping enough of the lava off his face, Krystalak growled furiously and lunged towards Obsidius, sending the two toppling to the ground. Rolling across the sand, they hit another building, breaking it down on top of them. The two creatures roared as debris rained down upon them until Obsidius planted his feet on Krystalak's gut, kicking him off and sending him through the air, landing atop a structure that was quickly leveled underneath the monster. But the crystal creature was back on his feet in an instant, quickly turning himself around and unleashing shards of crystal from his tail at Obsidius. The lava golem brought his arms up in front of him, shielding his face as the shards shattered against his armored skin. As he brought his arms down, Obsidius was body slammed by Krystalak, sending him crashing through another building. Before the rocky beast could rise, Krystalak nailed him with another blast of his prism beam, then another. The molten monster cried out with each blast, but finally managed to pull away and roll himself into his ball-like form once again. He once more began heading towards Krystalak, but the evil abomination was ready for him. He leapt into the air, ready to let Obsidius pass underneath him as he had before, but the volcanic creature was expecting the move this time. The moving boulder bounced into the air, striking Krystalak and knocking him from the sky. Krystalak hit the ground with a thud, groaning in pain. Obsidius landed and unfurled himself, glaring at his fallen foe. Pass.
The two crystal-born beasts glared silently at one another, each waiting for the other to make the next move. For a while, it seemed as if neither creature was going to be the first to attack. Krystalak suddenly broke the lull as he spun around, firing more crystal shards from his tail. Obsidius blocked these with his arms as he had before, but this time, when he lowered his arms, even more shards struck, hitting deep within his open mouth and shattering within. Obsidius staggered and clutched at his throat, obviously hurt by the attack. Molten blood gurgled and spilled from his maw. His foe hurt. Krystalak leapt into the air, ready to strike. But to his surprise, Obsidius was still able to defend himself despite his injury. Swinging his fist around, Obsidius backhanded Krystalak hard, cracking his armored face and sending him crashing onto his back, barely conscious. His opponent taken care of for the moment, Obsidius collapsed, the crystal shards within him taking their toll. For a time, it seemed as if the fight was over. Both creatures were down and didn't seem as if they'd be getting back up anytime soon. Unfortunately, before the remaining population of Honolulu could breathe a collective sigh of relief, the sky began to darken. Thick black storm clouds began to gather, lightning occasionally cracking through the darkened sky. The black clouds slowly began to part as a large mass started to lower itself down from the sky. It was a grotesque sight that could only be described as a gigantic golden dragon, its color that of gold.
Dig blasted.
It was a grotesque sight that can only be described as a gigantic ball of flesh, its color that of blood. It began to slow down as it approached the ground, finally setting itself down in the middle of the Punch Bowl crater, sending tremors throughout the surrounding areas.
Did the KWC predict Honolulu getting destroyed in Godzilla 2014?
Hey! This session of matches has been like nothing but predictions for the future. What the heck?
I think Gareth Edwards and Michael Daugherty are just that big of fans. It turns out that they also wrote matches for the KWC.
Yeah, they just and submissive fetish.
Yeah, they just went under the pseudonyms of Christian Salibert. That's all. All right, keep reading.
The quaking as the mysterious thing landed was enough to stir Krystalak out of consciousness. Out of unconsciousness. My mistake there. Shaking his head as he regained his wits, he quickly took notice of the strange orb and pulled himself to his feet. He started making his way toward it, ignoring Obsidius's motionless form. Trudging through the remains of a destroyed building, Krystalak let out a low growl, flexing his claws as he approached the fleshy sphere, his mind filled with sinister curiosity. Behind him, Obsidius began to recover, the crystal shards within him having been incinerated by his body's intense internal temperatures. The molten beast roared weakly as he felt his strength returning to him, slowly bringing himself back to his feet. He saw Krystalak marching through the city and looked forward to see where he was headed, instantly spotting the mysterious orb. Unlike his brother, however, Obsidius stayed back, receiving an ominous vibe from the strange ball. Krystalak took another step toward the sphere, growling as he felt pure evil emanating from within. But he also felt power, and Krystalak liked power. Just as he began to raise his clawed hand, the orb began to quake, shaking the entire area. Suddenly, the massive ball of flesh exploded with a blinding burst of light. Krystalak raised his arms, shielding his eyes from the intense light as the ground shook violently. Far behind him, Obsidius did the same, even though I don't think he has any eyes. Amazingly, neither creature was knocked off their feet by the blast, and the light finally began to fade. But as the two monsters lowered their arms, they found the entirety of Honolulu completely pulverized by the explosion. Even though Krystalak was right in front of the orb, not a building remained intact. Every tree was reduced to ash. The city was covered in dark smoke and fire.
To be fair, the same could be applied to Super Godzilla, where Godzilla just kind of was able to tank it, but everything around it was destroyed. So, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do I have one more?
One
or
more. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Honolulu's gone. Reduced to atoms.
Damn. It got to it before global warming could.
Blessed.
Despite the carnage around him, Krystalak was certain he spotted a figure standing in the crater, obscured by the smoke. Roaring in immediate challenge, the crystalline monster charged, throwing his arms open wide, ready to attack. Instantly, a powerful white beam pierced the black fumes. Yeah.
Damn.
Uh-oh.
Damn.
Damn, indeed. Alright, hold on a sec. Technical difficulties, folks. We'll be right back. Shrug? I don't know.
Dibbly 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 dibbly.
Yeah, once okay.
Alright, I'll finish this paragraph and then I'm gonna have to go for a bit because apparently my older brother made a mess in the bathroom before he left.
Uh-oh.
So I have to go clean that up. Okay,
Disappointing son. Making my other son clean up his mess.
Instantly, a powerful white beam pierced the black fumes, catching Krystalak square in the chest and sending him careening backwards through the air until he crashed into the sea. Watching his apostrophe brother crash into the waves, Obsidius instantly curled up into his rolling form and made a beeline for the new being, rolling over the remains of Honolulu. Obsidius was seconds away from slamming into the beast before it turned itself around, swatting Obsidius with his tail and sending the molten monster flying through the air. Nearly to the other side of the island, Obsidius' landing was heralded with a distant thud. Pass.
In the smoke, Manila's eyes narrowed.
Dig blasted.
Bagan's eyes narrowed. He waited for the creatures to attack. Again. Groggily, Krystalak pulled himself up and shook his head. He glared at Bagan and roared furiously, breaking into a charge once again. Energy built up in the super monster's mouth as he charged his plasma breath, preparing to once more strike the spiked beast with it. He fired, but this time Krystalak dodged the blast, leaping to the side as he continued to run forward. Bagan briefly considered grinning. The creature was learning. Perhaps it would prove to be a decent challenge after all. Bagan fired another blast of plasma, only for Krystalak to leap into the air and slash his claws downward, leaving diagonal slices across Bagan's face. The gray beast growled as the wounds began to heal, snarling at his crystal foe. He lashed out, clutching Krystalak by the throat and tossing him aside, rolling across the ground. Krystalak quickly got back to his feet and fired his prism beam. Bagan immediately retaliated with his plasma breath and two energies exploded on contact. The two beasts recoiled from the explosion and Krystalak recovered first, lunging at Bagan. Supermanster spun around, intent on battering Krystalak with his mighty tail, but the white and purple monster leapt onto Bagan's back. The horned demon roared as it tried to dislodge the crystal beast, but Krystalak would have none of it, repeatedly stabbing Bagan's back with his razor-sharp claws. Bagan howled in pain and fury as Krystalak started drawing blood. His horns crackling with energy, Bagan summoned a star-like projectile from the sky, blasting Krystalak and knocking him clear. Landing on his back, Krystalak lifted his head to glare at Bagan, only to have the dragon's tail smash across his face. Bagan watched as Krystalak crumpled to the ground, hurt by the blow. His lips curled in satisfaction. He was enjoying watching Krystalak in pain. Taking a step forward, he prepared to finish the lower life form, when suddenly something hard smashed into his back. Bagan cried out, feeling his spine crack as he toppled to the charred earth. Furiously, Bagan raised his head, trying to spot what dared to attack him. He received his answer as Obsidius' foot kicked him in the face, sending him skidding across the dirt.
Damn.
Lightning dancing across his horns, Bagan pulled himself to his feet and let out a blast of his plasma breath. Catching Obsidius in the shoulder, the golem howled as the energy assaulted his rocky hide, distracting him long enough for Bagan to reach him. The Supermanster smashed his snout horn into the side of Obsidius' head, staggering the beast. Bagan quickly bent down, catching his head horns on Obsidius' crackly skin, hoisting himself back up. Bagan sent the lava monster soaring over his head, only to smack him with his tail, forcing him to the ground with a violent crash. Bagan shrieked as he suddenly felt something sharp stab into his throat. Krystalak withdrew his tail, having shot off another round of crystal shards from his tip. Before Bagan could recover, the spiky creature spat out another blast of his prism beam, nailing Bagan in the face and scorching his flesh. Obsidius pulled himself to his feet and watched his counterpart blast the mighty dragon. Stepping forward, Obsidius unleashed his inferno, spewing molten lava onto Bagan's face. The assault finally became too much for Bagan, who toppled over onto his back. Is that all?
One more.
Oh, okay. Obsidius and Krystalak glared at each other. Even though they hated one another, they knew that neither of them could beat Bagan on their own, especially with them already worn out from their own battle beforehand. Reluctantly, the two came to an understanding, turning to face the gray creature together. Just as they turned, however, the dragon slammed his clawed hands into their guts. Sparks flew as Bagan's claws collided with their armor-like skin, knocking them through the air and onto their backs. The super monsters reached up and took hold of the crystal shards in his neck, wrenching them free of his flesh and tossing them to the ground. Angrily, he unleashed his plasma breath, but Obsidius and Krystalak were already out of the way, the beam exploding against the dirt. They came at him from both sides. Each time Bagan managed to defend himself from Krystalak's slicing claws, Obsidius would hit him with his mighty fists. Finally, Bagan had enough and summoned the Diamond Storm once again, bringing down a hail of destructive energy. The starlight blast toppled the two mutants, but they groggily managed to rise up again. Pass.
Okay. Bagan eyed his testicles, waiting for them to make...
Dick blast!
Taking this opportunity at his distracted
He did come in
opponent,
one.
What'd you say?
I said he did come in on a testicle.
Gosh darn it.
Taking this opportunity by his opponent being distracted, Krystalak leapt into the air, outstretching his clawed fingers as Bagan raised his head, ready to blast the crystal beast out of the sky. Obsidius curled up and rumbled forward, smashing hard into Bagan's testicles. Krystalak landed, breaking his claws across Bagan's flesh. The dragon turned back, groaning in pain as he staggered. Obsidius stood upright while Krystalak took his place next to him. The two immediately opened fire with their oral weapons. Bagan cried out as the prism beam and stream of lava burned into his chest, forcing him backwards. The pair held their blast, eventually bringing Bagan down to one testicle. Cutting off their attacks, they watched them downfall for a moment, his chest smoking. They both shrank back as Bagan lifted his head to look at them, fury in his eyes. The super monster suddenly shot forward, clutching both mutant creatures by the throats. He smashed them together, then tossed them aside. Just as they got back to the feet, the dragon unleashed a powerful plasma blast. Obsidius managed...
Plasma blast.
Plashed, anyway.
Plastic blast. Obsidius managed to roll out of the way, but the beam hit Krystalak dead in the center, striking his crystalline heart. The blast instantly overloaded the gem and its ability to store power within. Energy crackling over his body. Krystalak's entire upper torso exploded in bursts of flames, scattering tiny bits of crystal all over the island. His lifeless body half tipped to the side. Crashing to the ground, Obsidius swerved around and aimed directly for Bagan, intent on smashing into his legs, but the super monster was ready, and just as the golem was within reach, unleashed his plasma breath. The impact of the blast season sent him hurling out to the open sea. Further and further he flew until Bagan cut off his beam. Obsidius groaned as he skidded across the surface of the ocean, and then finally began to sink at the bottom of the Pacific. His rocky hide superheated by Bagan's blast. Obsidius boiled the sea as he sank, letting out a weak cry of defeat. But before he sank completely, he opened up his palm, and inside it was Bagan's remaining testicle.
But where did he sink? You have to be more Pacific.
Hey!
Bagan growled as he lost his last testicle, taking a moment to recuperate. He waited for Obsidius to rise up out of the water with his remaining testicle, but the molten creature did not appear again. The two beasts had proven to be a greater challenge than he expected. He had come to the island, hoping to feed off their crystal energies in an attempt to regain his legendary strength. But that was no longer possible. He had now lost his ability to mate. Bagan reared his head back, roaring in fury. Marching past Krystalak's charged remains, he took a step into the once stirring waters, coloring them red with blood since he's bleeding down there. Leaving Honolulu behind, he decided on the perfect target to vent his frustration on. Animal clinics. He will now team up with the neutered cats and dogs. Winner, no one.
Dick blessed.
Although I can't say it's a winner for Krystalak and Obsidius, they neutered him.
It's a draw.
This is the Rogue One of the KWC. They died, but they won.
That's great. Winner back and Dick blessed. Alright. I think what we have here is, once again, Christian does present a decent match on hand. I mean, this one felt more carefully looked over. It's like, oh no, 129 was riddled with a lot of errors. Let me be a little more careful with this one. Yeah, this one's a nice, solid, it's an overall solid match where you get Act 1 of Krystalak and Obsidius duking it out. Bagan comes in, the two team up, and they give Bagan a fun time and rip his testicle off. Anyway. No, I think this one is this is definitely, I was enjoying it up until it says, trying to regain his legendary strength. I'm like, gosh darn it. It was like, why couldn't he just be that naturally strong? Because I think this would have been a fine example of, just having fun with Bagan, not nerfing him just because it's like, oh, he's no longer legendary. It's like, I think this one could have, granted, this was still, once again, I think the Bagan trilogy had a clear influence for a lot of matches featuring Bagan. Yeah, that makes sense. But that nitpick aside, I think Obsidius and Krystalak do give Bagan a decent challenge when they team up, and yeah, I think this is a perfectly solid match from Christian. It has its good moments. I think it's a little better in some departments than some of his other matches, like Varan versus Krystalak. So I think this is better than that, but I can't say this is as good as his greats. I can't even say it's as good as 129, which I felt was really good with some of its narrative elements. Just a lot of like spelling hiccups and whatnot. But yeah, but at least this one's cleaner, and I'll give it that. So
hey, them ripping off his testicles was pretty good, and how Bagan also lost.
Yeah, how he
that wasn't clean either.
Yeah, how he totally lost. You could, see, just click the link below, scroll down to the bottom, click Bagan's picture, and you'll find it'll takes you to Obsidius, who's the one that did it.
Hey, let's not forget Krystalak. He was able to get the first one.
Dig blasted. That's dumb. That gosh darn last second dig blasted. That was so dumb.
We all know I made it better with that.
Gosh darn.
Yeah.
Alex, what'd you think of the match?
Aside from making it entertaining with that whole testicle subplot, it's your standard Kaiju fighting match. It's nothing really exceptional. I don't think anything really stood out to me, except maybe Obsidius disappearing in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, it's just there.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad. It's just it's just not. It's kind of nothing for me.
Yeah. All right. No, that's fair. I could totally see that. Like, you always gotta have the average ones, the ones that are just par for the course. They follow the rules, they do what you ask for. It's the Kaiju War Chronicles. Here we are. So, yeah. Nagoda, what'd you think of it?
It was pretty good. I like the first part where Obsidius and Krystalak are fighting, and then Bagan just drops like a nuke. And then Banner's pretty nice looking too. I like the red skies and lightning.
Yeah,
I didn't know this was Crisis.
Oh, right. Yeah, I like the banner for this one too. It's got you got Obsidius behind, Krystalak up front, Bagan in the middle. They all have a nice tint of red. Blends with the environment. So yeah, it's fine. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah. So when is GVJ gonna become the anti-monitor and just wipe out this world?
Oh, yes.
What the heck? Is there something I'm not aware of?
He's talking about the anti-monitor from DC, who has the ability to wipe out multiverse or universes.
Oh.
Yeah. Red skies first.
It is time to do that. I want to wipe out some KWC universes.
Gosh darn
it. All right, who's next?
Well, first off, I did want to say,
well, fuck you.
Wow, what the fuck, man? You ignored my bro?
No, I was gonna say something. It was like super important, and I can't remember what it was anymore. Joe, go ahead. I might remember it.
You know what? Don't answer this racist ass.
Dig blasted. Hey, Joe, what'd you think of the match?
It was fine. It's kind of your standard Bagan match. If you like Bagan matches, read it. If you don't, skip it. If you want to see Krystalak, if you really hate Krystalak and Obsidius, read it.
Video game monster bad.
Don't you know this is just Battle of the Video Game Monsters?
Oh yeah, they are.
That's what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to say.
Fuck you.
Gotta get it off before I forget. I'm kind of surprised to see the appearance of the orb. Like, I know that's not much since it doesn't actually, fight or anything. But it's like, oh yeah, Bagan comes down from the orb, blows up, and then the fight starts. It's like, oh.
And he's there.
Huh.
He comes in on a giant testicle.
Yes, he does. A giant testicle.
At least he started with it this time instead of ending with it like in 56.
Yeah. So, it is more tribute to the game, where it's like, comes down from the orb, and then it blows up, and then it reveals him, and then the fight begins. So, it's more appropriate that way. But yeah, I think this might be the second match to utilize it. I think.
Hold up, so I just thought of something.
Yeah.
So you're saying that, so technically, since he showed up in the orb in this one, and got blasted away in the orb form in 56, you could technically say that it's all Gomora's fault that this happened because he shot him off over there.
Well, I think that's what's
into
implied.
The sunset, and he landed in Honolulu.
Yeah, I think that's what could technically be implied, because it's like there's the whole idea of like, oh, Bagan needs to regain his legendary strength. It's like, I think this could be a very loose continuation of 56.
So what you're saying
everything's a loose continuation of that.
Yes, it is.
Oh yeah.
It just kind of became the go-to place of like, oh yeah, Bagan's weak now. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, personally,
So what
I'm
you're
not...
saying is,
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
it's all Gamora's fault.
Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying, Joe. It's all Gamora's fault. It's instead of the bottom being winner, Bagan, or draw, or whatever it was we gave it, it should just say loser Gamora.
Making him tonight's biggest loser.
But yeah, just nice to see that. Anyway, any other thoughts? Like, any thoughts of the banner or whatnot? Or
I think the banner looks cool.
In the meantime, we'll see you guys next time for match 132. Till then, everyone.
Man, that match made me hungry for ass.
Don't you eat testicles?